Hey guys, it's me, RST, and I'm back with another video. Now, before we get into the video, I wanted to talk about a few things. First of all, I'm very sorry that I haven't uploaded over the past few days. I've been really busy. I am a full-time college student, so I've been making sure that I'm going to get all my stuff done, everything like that. It is getting a little bit crazy as we're getting later into the semester, so my goal has been to upload once every day or every other day, and I missed a couple days. I'm really sorry about that. I will get back on it. I do have a video planned to come out tomorrow. It's going to be over a Switch Axe build, so make sure you guys subscribe and tune in for that. Secondly, before we get into the tier list, I want you guys to go and comment below what you think the #1 monster is going to be. I do have separate tiers, but I have a tier specifically for the best monster. Don't cheat. Tell me right now what you think it's going to be. I'll be honest, if you guys have been into endgame, it should be pretty simple. It's pretty, I think it's pretty cut and dry in my opinion. I think it's pretty obvious and there's not much room for debate, honestly. This video is going to be kind of longer, so you guys might want to go get some popcorn, go get some food, make sure you sit down, watch the whole thing. Don't cheat, don't skip to the end, and tell me what you think the best monster is going to be. I will be reading the comments down below. I'll be liking and hearting any comments where you get it right. And also, this is my opinion. Before I did this video, I went out and tested every single monster with Wyvern writing, even the ones that I knew pretty well, to make sure that my opinions were all going to be pretty accurate for me. Now, if you guys disagree, let me know in the comments below. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but again, remember, everybody's opinion is their opinion. Respect it. You guys can have a discussion in the comments below. I will join in with the discussion, but let me know what you guys think. You don't have to give me your whole tier list. Just say, I say that Arzaros is, S tier, and you're like, no, I think he's A tier. Let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, let's get right into the video. Alright guys, we're going to get into it. Up here you can see all the monsters. I went ahead and did testing just to make sure that I was super correct on my opinion on all of these. I went and before I made this video, I went and gave them a few Wyvern rides each to make sure that all of my information was going to be correct, okay? So this isn't just based on my feelings. Obviously it is my opinion, but I went and kind of got some statistics before I went and did this. So we are going to go in reverse order, so we're going to go from weakest to strongest, okay? Let's get into the first monster. Starting off, we're going to go for Camellios. They put them on this tier list. There were multiple ones to choose from that had the monsters. This one I like the best because it had the icons. A lot of them had just straight up pictures, but parts of the monster would be kind of cut out. I've always liked the icons for a lot of the monsters. It's mixed a little bit. Some of them are the rise ones, some of them they're old ones, but we're still going to use this one. So Camellios is not in the game yet. Whenever he comes into the game, I'll give you all my opinion on him. But for the monster that I think is the weakest personally is going to be Arzaros, okay? Where is he? He is right here. So the reason why I think this is because his back A is not very good. Usually if monsters are pretty good, they have a pretty good backwards A attack. That's their strong attack. His is very low range, damage, and speed. All of the things that are going to make him bad. And then his regular A is the swipes. You're going to see for a lot of these monsters that their swipes, if they have them, for example, Vulvodon, who we're going to get into soon, just as a heads up, he also has the swipes. The swipes are just terrible because, say the monster flinches whenever you're hitting them with it, which I doubt because it does very little damage. They get pushed so far back, you're going to have to do 4 or 5 swipes to get to them. The swipes themselves aren't even fast, and it's probably the lowest damage Wyvern riding move in the game. Even though you can do multiple in a row and kind of combo it, it's still bad. Alright, for our next monster, we're going to talk about Tetranodon. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any of these things. These are just how I say them. So, you're going to notice a theme. Big monsters, unless they do a lot of damage, they're not going to be placing too well on this. So, Tetranodon, low speed, low range, low damage. All of those to me equal a D tier. I gave him above Arzaros because he does do a little bit more damage while having less speed. But at least on his back A, he does the Lagombi jump. You'll notice a few of them have a jump or kind of like a pounce. At least he has that so he can kind of, cover some distance quickly once the actual move starts. But before that, it's very slow. Next is Vulvodon. Same reasons as Arzaros. Swipes are terrible. But its back A is its little tongue flick. This move is actually pretty decent. It's got good range, good speed, but it's still very low damage, very low damage. So for me, it was kind of close to C tier, but I'm going to give it a D tier because, again, the swipes just really don't do it for me. And also, if you need to actually just move for some reason, it's just a slow monster in general, so that's not very good for Wyvern riding for me. Alright, for our next monster, we've got Baroth. For me, he just barely didn't make C tier. Now, when I say that there's very few monsters with like really low range, for me, Baroth, Arzaros, and one other that we're going to get into in C tier, I mean, they have literally almost no range. Like, it's insane. His back A, which again is usually their highest damage, furthest going move with the most range, literally, I mean, where you activate it, he basically hits his feet. He does a little downward head slam. It can't hit anything. I mean, multiple times I would test it, and I'd be just an inch off the monster, and it would miss. And I'm like, how in the world does that happen? So I think he's not good. His forward A is okay. It's kind of his little forward charge and kind of head flick. It's alright, but it still does very low damage, so it doesn't really redeem anything for me. The only thing he's got going for him is his speed on his regular A, but everything else about him sucks. Our next monster is going to be Jira Todas. This is the last monster we're going to talk about that really has almost no range. It's insane. I have never seen a hip check miss as many times as with this Jira Todas back A. I started all the way back in Freedom Unite. Of course, everybody remembers the Plesioth hitbox. If they gave Jira Todas the Plesioth hitbox, I mean, my goodness, it might have been an S tier. Might have been #1 monster. But I was literally right on top of the monster, and if his Jira Todas' like actual leg does not touch the monster, it won't hit them. The head every once in a while was kind of iffy on me, but the tail, if you were slightly offset in front of the monster, the tail is never going to count as a hit for some reason. So for me, it just really was way too bad to look past. I think Jira Todas is the worst monster in C tier. Royal Ludroth is the second worst monster in C tier. It's kind of like its moves in game. You're going to notice those. Typically, there's going to be a few outliers, but typically, the kind of weaker monsters are also going to be weaker on the Wyvern writing tier list. That kind of makes sense. But the way that Royal Ludroth does its moves is it's kind of how it does its thing where it lifts one paw up and kind of shakes its mane before it does its moves. Really long, my bad. They aren't very strong, and again, they just don't have great range. So its back A is like the little roll, I believe. Either one of its two A moves is the roll. It's low range, really slow. Another reason, obviously, why the slowness is going to be really bad is because if you're fighting a fast monster, in the time that you're starting up to do your move, they're going to hit you and they're going to flinch you, and then you're going to have to use your Soak Bug to dodge to then try it again. So yeah, that's why Royal Ludroth is in C tier for me. Now, onto a monster I kind of suspected would not be the greatest, but I didn't expect it to be this bad, is Ignosum. So, its back A, I will give it, does a lot of damage, but the way that it maneuvers into it is it's just like whenever it does its little backwards kick, it kind of double hops to where the monster is whenever you press the A, and then it does the move. It's got pretty good damage on it, but a lot of the times, especially, you'll use it a lot in the Magnamalo fight to attack Magnamalo, and it just, by the time that it gets there, Magnamalo's already moved, and then if you're not right on it, it doesn't hit. Like I said, it's exactly its leg hitbox. Its regular A is not bad again, but we're looking for a little bit better. I should have clarified. For me, the way that I do tier list is going to be B is average, A is above average, pretty good. S is amazing. Obviously, #1 monster is going to be the best. C tier is just a little bit below average, and D tier is going to be they suck. For this next monster, before I actually kind of talk about it, its move type is pretty good. So, Lagombi's back A is kind of, whenever I talk about other monsters, I usually call it Lagombi's back A because it's the first time you see it and you're like, oh, that's pretty good, and then you realize other monsters just have a better version of it. It's going to be whenever it does its jump into its butt slam. Now, the move itself there is pretty good, but they took a portion of its damage and put it into the roll it does after. So you'll notice a lot of the multi-hit moves are not as good because they are multi-hit. So it does its jump and its butt stomp, and if it had the damage from the butt stomp and the roll it does afterwards just in the butt stomp, it'd be B tier at least. But it's probably about 60% is in the stomp and 40% is in the roll, and so it jumps and lands and takes probably a full second and a half. That might be an exaggeration, but it takes quite a long time for it to actually do the roll that does the rest of the damage. So for me, that's going to be why Lagombi's in C tier. Alright, for our next monster, it's probably going to surprise you. It surprised me whenever I went to go test it, because I had used it in a hunt, and I went back to go think about it, and I was like, surely there's no way that they made a monster this strong this week, but they did. Tigrex, the monster that they literally used to show off Wyvern riding for the very first time, is very weak in my opinion. You've always got to remember, maybe just the certain scenario, maybe the monster I was attacking it with was not great for it, but Tigrex for me was very underwhelming. With it being such a high tier monster, usually, in terms of difficulty in base games where it's not something crazy, where it's an Elder Dragon, anything like that. For non-Elder Dragons, it's usually for me in the top tier of difficulty or right below it. This monster, its back A is its spin. And I don't know why they decided, you know what? All these moves that have pretty crazy hitboxes against hunters, let's make it against monsters when they're actually Wyvern riding it to have terrible hitboxes. Because if Tigrex does not touch you with its hurt box, you being the monster, you will not get hit. So there were many times where I was like, alright, dash up to it, back A, and it would just not hit whatsoever. And even when it does, it's much less damage than you would think. I think in high rank, it's like low 200s, maybe high 200s, but as you'll see later on in the list, that's not really going to cut it. Its regular A is its kind of forward dash, but it has a ton of startup, probably about a second of startup, and the damage is less than the spin. So for me, Tigrex, I'm very disappointed. I've always loved Tigrex. Tigrex might be a top 5 non-Elder Dragon for me, but it just was very underwhelming. For our last monster that just barely didn't make the cut for B tier is going to be Pookie. So the reason why is its back A. It takes a little wind up. It does its little tail shake into the poison spray that goes directly upwards. I swear, a lot of this you'll notice is weird hitboxes. The poison will be on the monster, but only about half to maybe 5/8 of the length of the actual poison spray will hit the monster. There were multiple times where I was kind of trying to test the maximum range, and the poison was very clearly, visually going through the monster, but it wouldn't get hit. So that took it down quite a bit for me. Damage on it is probably slightly above average. And then its regular A is just kind of a dash, so it's not that impressive. So yeah, that's going to close it off for C tier. Now we're going to get into B tier, which like I said is going to be where the average is. This is going to be where the most monsters are, but this is what I think are the average monsters at Wyvern riding. Alright, so for me, there's actually quite a big jump from top of C to bottom of B. This one was kind of never really in contention for C. The only time it was a little bit was compared to the rest in B. Compared to the rest in B, it's not great, but it just didn't really like scream C tier to me. So that's going to be Anginath. Now, we kind of know, Anginath, especially in World, kind of fast. Hits very hard. Does neither of those really in Wyvern riding. It's just kind of average speed, maybe a little bit honestly below average power, but because he's so big, he's got pretty good range. His back A, I can't remember if it's his back A or his regular A. One of them is his little move where he kind of rises up, no pun intended, goes down into the ground, kind of bites the ground, comes back up and does another bite, kind of like the shark, I call it. It does alright damage, but again, with it being a multi-hit, to get all of your damage, you're going to have to take so long, because the good thing about Wyvern riding is you can do a hit and immediately dodge cancel it. This, if you want to get all the damage out of it, you're going to have to do both of them, so you can't really dodge cancel it that fast. So that's why it's going to be bottom of B for me. Again, range and damage are not terrible, but because of the fact that you can't cancel its strongest move, that kind of brings it down for me. The next one, I'm going to say before seeing the rest of the tier list, this one might kind of surprise you that it's this high, but you'll kind of see a pattern start to come into play. This is going to be Kulu Yaku. Now, I know it's technically not, but it kind of falls into that great category. When I say great Azuchi, great baggy. Kulu Yaku does what most of the greats are pretty good at, but not as well as the other ones. It has pretty good damage, pretty good speed, pretty good range, but just toned down from all the other ones. Its back A is it's kind of like pounce forward, and then its regular A is just kind of a little dash and swipe. It was pretty good speed and range, not too great on damage, but for the most part, it was I would say, for me, Kulu is kind of the perfect definition of like an average monster. You know, if you thought of Kulu Yuku, you know, it's kind of like first quarter of monsters-ish. You know what I mean? It kind of does what it's expected to. So that's why it's going to be B tier for me. Now, we're on to everybody's favorite monster, you know? Khezu. Best soundtrack, best monster song as everybody knows in the game, obviously. But, all jokes aside, it suffers from the same issues as Tigrex. Its back A, which should usually be its strongest move, is where it puts his tail, I guess, in the ground and does its electric little shock. And I'm telling you, you can be right on a monster, but unless the electricity itself touches them, it will not hit them. So that's why it's low for me. But its one redeeming factor is its regular A is its little, ooh, how do I say this in a wholesome way? Its long, flaccid neck will do its little forward and kind of swirl. And so that has great range and great speed, but like really low damage. Maybe 25% if it's lucky of the highest damage move in the game. So Khezu, kind of what I expected. I didn't know, you know, coming into it, it's kind of hard to tell. Some monsters, their move sets make a lot of sense. Some of them I'm like, really, that's what they went for. I could have seen them maybe doing regular A, be its kind of jump and pounce, maybe even with the lightning if they wanted to, and being its back A what its regular A is. But to stand there and do the shockwave unless the monster's down, which then you've got to run up to it and do it, so you're losing time, it's just not very good. So that's why it's going to be B tier. Alright, now we have one of my favorite monsters that they added in Rise, actually, Bishaten. It very much is in theme with the monster. It's kind of a mid-tier monster, mid-game monster. And its good attributes are its speed, and it has pretty good range. But, as I'm sure you expected me to say, damage is just not there. It just doesn't do that much damage. I know that a big part of Wyvern riding is just getting the damage and the shinies in order to actually knock it over. But obviously, if you see a bigger damage number, it's going to feel better. You know, if you're doing a lot more damage, cutting down on your hunt time, like, again, the number one monster I'm going to talk about, I mean, seriously, I'm trying to think. You can probably pretty consistently get about 3,000 damage in with it, and that's insane. High rank Bishaten, you might get 700-ish if you're lucky. That's what's going to be B tier for me. Again, it's pretty above average in speed and range, but its damage really brings it down. Next up is going to be a monster. I want y'all to leave in the comments below what you think what monster I'm going to say after I say this next part. I think that this is for sure the hardest new monster that they added in Rise. Maybe I just suck, but I think that this is the hardest monster in Rise, including all of the old monsters that they brought back. So I want you all to leave in the comments below what monster you think I'm going to say before I say it, and we'll see if you get it right. I'll give you just a second. 3, 2, 1. Almadron. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think so. I've looked at the name about 20 times trying to make sure. Almadron, for me, when I first fought it, kind of gave me the impression it was going to suck at Wyvern riding. Because, again, one of the key factors is going to be speed. Its damage and its range are very good. Its damage and its range are S tier. But its speed, it's probably the slowest monster in the game. Its back A is its little side tail swipe where the mud kind of crawls forward. So I don't know if the devs kind of intended you to use it from a distance and let the mud crawl forward as you go towards it or whatever. But it really puts into perspective when you're on such a big monster how slow that mud is. It's for me, it's gotten it like a stray hit like once, and even then it doesn't do that much damage. The actual tail itself does a lot of damage, but like I said, it's very slow. And because of the angle it kind of goes at, it doesn't give you that much damage. Now, its forward in A is it's kind of like, I'm pretty sure it's like a Mizu slam. That has a lot of damage and a lot of range, but again, it kind of winds up before it does it, so that's going to bring it down for me. Alright, now we got a fan favorite. Everybody loves Nara Gakuga, unless you're trying to get some really good Wyvern rides in. Again, B tier is average. If I see this monster and it's free for Wyvern rider, or it says press A to ride Wyvern because my monster had a turf war with it, I'm never going to say no, but I was expecting more. Especially with it being such a fast monster. That's kind of its whole theme. And Again, another theme you'll see in this is a lot of things have a long wind-up time. And the moves that they chose for its A, I typically mainly focus on the A moves. I did try its X moves. X moves are pretty decent, but you really get a lot of your gauge and a lot of your damage from the A moves, the strong moves. So its back A is its tail slam, but the tail just does not go that far, and it has to do that thing where it kind of flicks it up and kind of swings it around a little bit, and then it turns around and tail slams. So a lot of times, if you're fighting a monster, it's moved by the time you hit it, but if you do hit it, it has pretty above average damage. Not crazy though. And then its regular A is just kind of like a charge forward, like a lot of things. Not terrible, not great. That's pretty average. So for me, it's speed is below average, damage is above average on back A, and then its regular A is just average overall, so it averaged it out to a B. Now we've got a contender for mine, and from what I've heard a lot around the community, people's favorites. Gosharag. Now, this one, if you think about it, kind of makes sense. The reason why I think he's such a fun fight is because sometimes he's fast, sometimes he's slow. He's kind of, until you learn the fight, he's pretty unpredictable. But in Wyvern riding, that doesn't really help you that much because you're not fighting him. So his timings are just kind of weird. I don't know, it just doesn't really flow super well. As you would expect with it being kind of an in-game monster for now, pretty good damage. But with him being so small in comparison, he's pretty bulky, but he's not very long. Doesn't have great range. His A attacks are like his claw, like icicle attacks. Or if he doesn't have his icicle, just his regular like fists. But it's just kind of what you'd expect. A slam and like a little like kind of Arzaros charge. So again, the damage is really good. If you can get the hits, he does really well. But the actual act of getting up there to get the hits is what makes it hard and brings him down. This next one really hurt my heart, and not necessarily because it's not the greatest, more so because it doesn't really feel to me like the move that should be its best, its back A, really fits this monster. I'm going to be talking about Zinogre. Zinogre might be my favorite monster. That or Stygian Zinogre or a couple other are always kind of rotating in and out, but it is 100% for sure a top 3 monster for me. And probably, out of all the returning ones, probably my favorite. Now, its back A specifically is a move that I can't even remember. It might be new to Rise, or maybe he just didn't use it very much before. It's the move where he roars and 3 lightning bolts shoot out in front of him. That doesn't feel very Zinogre to me. I feel like they should have made it. Again, I'm not a game developer. I couldn't have done it myself, but just most monsters' moves make sense to me. This one, with it being Zinogre, he's themed off a WWE wrestler. He just stands there and roars, and some lightning goes forward. That's not that impressive. I feel like he should have done one of his flips, done a tail slam, done his little twirl where he goes up into the air, something along those lines. It just wasn't very impressive for me. Him being it being a back A, it does pretty decent damage. It comes out pretty fast, but part of this list is going to be kind of, again, it's my opinion. Well, actually, I think just based on the moves alone is what we got it a B tier, but I did want to touch on this because I think Zinogre is such a cool monster. I know some people don't like him, but I just wish that they would have given him a more on-theme move, in my opinion. Now we're getting on up there in B tier. These last 2 monsters really, for me, were close. I kind of interchanged them a couple times with other monsters in A tier. But the first one, in my opinion, the second best one in B tier is going to be Somnikanth. Now, remember how I talked about the Lagombi back B? Again, it looks very different, or back A, my bad. It looks very different, but it does this little move where it has a very short wind up, and then it does this little dive onto the monster. Now, this little pounce does a lot of damage, has a lot of range, is very quick. But you'll see later on, there's at least 1 monster, maybe 2, that do its move, but just better in every way. The damage is pretty average. I know I just said it's pretty good. I was thinking compared to Lagombi, it's pretty average overall. But its back A is very good. If it just brought up the damage and these other ones weren't there for me to compare it, I think it would probably be A tier. But we're gonna move on. Final B tier monster is gonna be Mizu. From the demo, maybe I'm just not seeing this monster clearly because I Wyvern rode it so much against Magnamalo, against other monsters. It just kind of, maybe its magic wore off, but I tried to look at it as objectively as I possibly could, and I just feel that the way that it kind of moves is a detriment to it. So because it uses its bubbles, a lot of times what will happen, especially if you're fighting a smaller monster, maybe it's just the quest I chose to Wyvern ride on it, what it'll do is whenever it slides, it has some auto targeting, obviously, but if the monster moves, again, because it does its back A where it does the little jump forward and then like kind of the sidewind tail slam, sometimes it'll miss, and also like sometimes it just slides into attacks. I feel like if it was more firm, if it was more stiff as a monster moving, and it wasn't so fluid, you know, there is such a thing as too much fluidity, it wouldn't accidentally slide into monster moves a few times, you know. There was some times where my move was right about to come out, but it just kind of slid into an awkward position and got hit. So for me, if it didn't have that one little flaw, it would be A tier, but that's going to bring it down to the very top of B tier for me. Okay, we're on to the final 12 monsters and A tier. So for the monster that just barely made it out of the average tier for me is going to be Ragna Kadaki. Hope I'm saying that right. The reason why is going to be its damage is very good, even for the quest that it shows up in. One thing you've got to kind of take into account is what monsters it's going to be fighting, because if it's fighting stronger monsters, they're going to have a stronger health pool. But even so, Ragna Kadaki does very good damage. Its back A is going to be very similar to a monster we're also going to talk about in A tiers. You can probably guess based on the fact that it spits fire in kind of a fan motion, but it does it very slow. But I kind of found a technique, if you want to get a little bit more advanced with Wyvern riding, where because it does it right to left, the startup is not so long, but the motion itself is a very slow sweep. So you're going to eventually hit whatever you're aiming at. It's just going to take a long time to get there, but it does over 300 damage, which is very good. Is if you can get either really close or kind of set yourself off to the left of it, then it'll hit it really quickly, you can dodge cancel. That's what's keeping it out of being higher in A tier, is its speed. But its damage is really good, and the range is really good, especially on its regular A attack. There's a lot less damage, but again, really good range. This next one was pretty polarizing, I will not lie. There's certain aspects to it that I love, and there's certain aspects to it that I really didn't like that much. It's going to be Magnamalo, the game's flagship monster. So I'm glad he's at least above average in my opinion, but his back A is his, I believe it's high rank only. I don't remember seeing it in low rank, but I've only fought him in low rank. Well, whenever I fight him in low rank now, I just kill him almost instantly. But it's his move where he kind of winds up and does like 3 kind of tail swipes, but it's a really weird hitbox. Only the really like final one actually hits usually, and the Hellfire powder doesn't really ever hit, but it does do really good damage, and the startup on the actual animation is not that long. Like, he kind of sits back just really quickly, then goes. So that's why it was still pretty good. His regular A attack, his little poke with his tail, and it's a multi-hit, but the reason why it's still going to be A for me even with a multi-hit is because his body is the first hit and his tail is the second. And just typically the way that he does it is, unless you're super far off, you're going to hit both and you hit them almost at the same time. It's kind of like a shoulder touches. Okay, now we're on to the entire series flagship monster, Rathalos. Just a brief tangent real quick. I kind of love Rathalos in this game. Unless I'm just absolutely crazy, I've thought about it every time I fight him. He is so different. In World, they already revamped him. They made him feel kind of more realistic instead of just, you know, he's got to turn every time he does something, just like they did in all the monsters with World. But he has, the best way I can describe it is flame beam type moves. So now he'll do a move, one, where he sits up in the air and he kind of winds back and he does a horizontal motion with his breath. And he has one where he does a vertical motion with his breath, so he covers both angles. Those are his A attacks. They're both very strong, very fast, very high damage. But the thing that's going to hold him back is they kind of take a little bit of wind up. The actual move itself is very fast, but it takes a little bit of wind up for him to kind of get his breath ready. And then also the damage is high. It's definitely above average, but it's not going to be as high as these next few monsters that we're going to be talking about, okay? Now, this next monster for me is, I'm not gonna lie, probably one of the most surprising, if not the most surprising. I believe that if this is going to be kind of a little bit of a hint later in the video, if some of the other monsters I hadn't fought before I fought those monsters, if that makes sense, you're going to understand, or you can already kind of understand, then they would be more surprising. But I think this is the most surprising one for me. It's going to be Bosarios, the very last monster I got around to fighting because I did not want to deal with the deflecting off its skin. But it's only up here because of one move, and it is its back A. It's his big old flame breath, or kind of beam. And this one really truly is a beam. It does a lot of damage. Like, it does like maybe mid 300s, which is very high up there. The only thing that's keeping it back from S is the fact that it takes a little while to wind up. It takes maybe 3/8 of a second, maybe half a second, maybe a quarter of a second, somewhere around there. But once it gets it out, you can immediately dodge once it makes contact with a monster, and it does a lot of damage. Its other moves suck. They're all slow. I'm sure they do pretty good damage, but they're all pretty slow. But that move alone carried it up here. Alright, just by kind of looking at our remaining monsters, I'm sure most of you have noticed by now, there's kind of a little bit of a type, an archetype that's going to get you pretty high up here, and that's going to be the Greats. Now, in my opinion, of these three, the weakest is going to be Great Baggy. So, with all of the Greats, I'll talk about it more when we get to these two, their back A is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I'm sure if you played the demo, you'll remember how everybody was just surprised by how strong Azuchi's back A was, because such a small monster, I think it did maybe the most damage of any move in the demo, or at least it does probably the most DPS for sure out of all the ones available in the demo. But for me, Baggy, it's just kind of generic moves. It's very quick, very fast, all of the things above. For its back A, not a great range, but it just was the least interesting. Interest is going to be a little factor in there. It just kind of does a Velociraptor kind of jump thing, if I remember correctly. But it's still very strong, very fast. That's going to get it A tier. Now, the monster on the cover art of the very first Monster Hunter game, and the flagship's girlfriend slash wife slash mate, whatever, Wrathion. Now, again, insane in the demo. The backflip is crazy strong. It's super strong. For the move, it's really good range. Like, I kind of honestly feel all of these hitboxes have been very true, almost too true, as I was talking about with Tigrex, Kezu, all of those. This one's got some pretty, it's got a little bit of leeway on if it's going to count as a hit or not. Still very good. As we know, the damage is very good. It's really good to attack cancel right after and go into another one really quickly. But the startup is what's going to keep it out of S tier for me. Now we're almost out of A tier. We're almost into S tier, but we got to talk about two more. Second to best in A tier. Both of these ones were very close to S tier for me, but I feel like S tier needs to be that really, really, like, if you see it on the map, you have to go get it because they're just so good. Barioth. Now, when I said Lagombi kind of has a move archetype, it's kind of funny, the little of a tic-tac-toe thing. I'd say Lagombi of this archetype has the worst back A, then Somnikanth, then Barioth. I'm talking about the ones where they do kind of a pounce or a jump and butt slam, anything of that nature. Barioth, I swear, almost has instant transmission. It is crazy. He does a little wind up, all of a sudden you're on the monster. And it does great damage, has great range. It'll almost instant transmission anywhere. It's really good. The only thing that kept it out of A tier for me is it does have, like, again, maybe a quarter of a second of wind up. And the damage is really good, but I think it's just below 300 or just above 300 from my memory. You're going to see once we get up here, unless they're just crazy fast, which some of them will be, their damage is pretty high up there. So that's what barely kept out of A tier for me. On to the final monster of A tier. It's going to be Great Raggi. So this one is kind of a weird one. He's kind of one of those ones, I don't know how to describe it. Just the timing's kind of off until you do it, and you're like, okay, not only does this make sense, but I just see how good it is. First time I used him, I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Its back A is a poison cloud. Now, it takes a second to come out, which is what barely keeps out at S tier, but it goes forward in such a way, even though it's kind of slow, that it is going to hit the monster because they're always going to charge at you, and it's going to hit them pretty hard, and you're going to hit them a lot of times with it. So it's good speed, good range, a little slow on the wind up, good power. That's what's going to put it in A tier for me. Again, go try it to back A if you have not yet. Finally, we are into the S tier, the top tier of monsters in my opinion. Now, I hope you guys didn't cheat and you commented at the start of the video like I said. I really think if you've been to endgame, you know which monster it's going to be. But if you have yet to comment below what monster you think, don't cheat. You've only got 4 to choose from here. Again, I hope you did it earlier in the video, but if you didn't, choose from these 4. They're not ordered in any way beforehand. This is just how they were listed, but we're going to get into S tier now. First up, Toby Kadachi. This one, again, this one or Bosarios is my most surprised. I knew it was going to be fast, but I didn't expect to be this strong or have this good a range. Imagine Nara Gakuga, but faster, stronger, and better range somehow. Doesn't make any sense to me, but its back A is exactly what you'd expect. Kind of what I was saying, what I was hoping with Zenogre, is its move makes perfect sense. It does this little backflip into its tail slam where it kind of looks over its shoulder and electrifies. Zenogre, if they used his equivalent, would have been, at least they could have made it bad, but it would have made sense. Toby's, I think it does high 200s, maybe 300, but again, it's one of those where it's so fast that you've got to look at the actual DPS, not the damage per hit. You do it, cancel. You do it, cancel. You do it, cancel, over and over again. And it's going to do a lot of damage to the monster, get you a lot of gauge, all of those things. The second best in S tier is going to be Diablos. Diablos was a pretty big surprise to me. It's fast, it's strong. The only thing that's keeping it from beating one of these two monsters is going to be its multi-hit. Its regular A is the right sweep, left sweep with its horns, but I think the attack total does like over 400 damage, so that's crazy. And then its back A is, I can't remember exactly, it might just be its charge, or maybe the back A is the swipe, but both of them are well into the 300s and fast. Multi-hit, little bit of a downside, but it's still really fast, still really strong. Kind of what you'd expect from this monster. Again, with it being an in-game monster, this makes sense to me for it to be up here. Who am I thinking of? Almadron thought it'd be higher. Zenogre thought it'd be higher. T-Rex thought it'd be way higher. All those things, this one makes a lot of sense to me. Finally, if you have played the demo, you know how insane Azuchi is. I don't know how you could say Azuchi's not S tier, unless you're wanting to hit the monster twice and get out of there, which would be weird to me. But almost instant on its back A, does insane damage, does an insane cancel out of it. It is so quick, so much DPS, like I was saying. I think in high rank it does around 280 damage, somewhere around there. Might be a little bit high. Y'all let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong on that. But it just does insane damage. I think if you've played the game hardly at all, I don't need to say anything else. If you haven't, go try Azuchi. And like, especially if you get a quest where it's like a medium monster, say like I think on the Bishathin quest maybe, Azuchi's there. Azuchi murders him, does so much damage. Now, the best monster by so insanely far is going to be Ragna. Now, one thing that's awesome about this, there's so many great things about it. First of all, its best move is its back A. Bosarios' beam, make it come out 3 times faster and do more damage, and that's Ragna's back A. I don't even think I've tried the other moves because there's no way that they're better. There's no way. But you get it enraged, which it does almost immediately after waking up, and I think it does 418 damage per beam, and you can probably in 1 second get 2 or 3 beams. So when I say the DPS is insane, it is absolutely crazy how much damage this monster puts out. What you want to do is, because you can see on the quest if it says unstable environment or something like that, it's got the little unknown monster symbol. It's always going to be Ragna. All you got to do is go find it. I don't necessarily know that it's worth it on Shrine Ruins because it spawns on top of that mountain. But say you're farming, especially for Almadron equipment, go get him. He spawns on the left side of the temple. I think it's area 3. Go get him. If you try to get a mounting move that's not going to quite mount him, I think it's probably somewhere around the 300 to 400 damage is what's going to initiate the mount. He usually wakes up, does 1 attack, and then becomes enraged. And if you can time it right, you won't spend much time getting him. And when I say he is insanely strong, he has to be the highest DPS anything in the game. Anything. Like, other than maybe like a Dragonator and Rampage or something where it's instant and it just does, you know, whatever. But it is so insanely much damage. Y'all have got to start using it. I did a test. I did 2 Insight Glaive runs. I say runs, you know, I was just farming Almadron stuff. One time I didn't get Rajang and it took me about 14 minutes. And the other time I got Rajang and it took me about 10 minutes. It's, you know, obviously there was some human error, there was some inconsistencies there, but just in general, Rajang is going to be so insanely good for your hunts. So yeah, that's going to be it for the end of the tier list. Y'all can look at this. I want y'all to let me know down below, did you get Rajang right? If you didn't comment before, if you did, go and reply to yourself, say you got it right. I'll be liking the ones where people got it right. If you don't agree with me on something, let me know. Again, this is my opinion, but I feel like this is a pretty accurate tier list. There's a few of them I'm kind of iffy on still. I think if I use them more, maybe they'll go up, maybe they'll go down, anything like that. But yeah, this is going to be the end of the video, guys. Please let me know again what you think. Tomorrow, I'm going to be having a Switch Axe build come out. Make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys be tuned for that. I've got 2 different types of builds for it. I think it's a really good build. If you like Switch Axe, it's got the essential Switch Axe skills on it, in my opinion. I really like the build. Haven't been much of a Switch Axe fan before, but this changed my opinion on it. It's amazing in Rise, so I will see you guys in that video tomorrow. Have a great day.